Hello, Manchester. Welcome to another edition of Girard at Large. I am your primary host, Rich Girard. Thanks for tuning in. Suddenly, I find myself with more time on my hands than I thought I'd have at this point. But here we are, nonetheless, and we'd be here either way. As you know, you can still find us on Facebook, but not at Twitter. I will not belong to an organization that bans a president of the United States while allowing the Taliban to tweet. And you can find us on a variety of other social media. It's not even worth mentioning, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't keep up with those. And in the not too distant future, I am going to be reshuffling the whole social media deck. I do plan, I'll probably hold on to Facebook, probably through the election anyway, and maybe through the end of the year. And then decide what alternative social media I want to have, if anything. I despise social media. I always have. And before I decided to run for mayor, I actually, posted that I was leaving Facebook, but then I decided to run for mayor. And there are just, frankly, too many people that are tapped into our Facebook pages to ignore in an election. So the primary has come and gone, and with it, your humble host by a mere 128 votes, and certainly it was a disappointing evening. But as I said at my election night party to the gathered masses, it was an opportunity for me to meet new friends and reacquaint myself with many older ones that I've had throughout the years here in the city. It's always a pleasure to meet the people of this city on their doorstoops. And I got to tell you something. I'm a note taker, and I literally filled notebooks with comments from people, what they liked about the city, what they didn't, what their frustrations were. And what I saw when I came across Victory Park tonight to come here is at the top of everybody's list of issues and things they want resolved, and that is the homeless problem, as people are setting up their camps for the night in Victory Park in violation of the camping ordinances, the curfews, and all of the other things that allegedly are being enforced but really aren't in this city. That was by far the number one issue. I've probably said this to you on a number of occasions, but I've done a lot of campaigning in this city over the years, either for my campaigns or the campaigns of others. And I have never seen, with the intensity and the pervasiveness, an issue grab the electorate like the housing issue has. One of the curious things, not the housing, the homeless issue, the vagrancy issue has, and I'm reminded, of my coining it the Great Vagrant Invasion of Manchester back in 2019. And the Great Vagrant Invasion of Manchester has succeeded. It's fair to say we have been invaded and have done really all the wrong things we could possibly do to try to beat it back and take care of it. So I do want to talk about, before I get to the election results, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of pundits who really honestly don't know what they're talking about, speculating that there are, a low voter turnout, and this means that people are happy with the city, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to get into all of those numbers tonight. But to those of you in this audience who cast your votes for me, who put a sign up on your front lawn, a bumper sticker on your rear window, who knocked on doors, who talked to friends, who posted to social media, who had my back on social media. Boy, you guys were busy, weren't you? With all of what went on social media by a certain campaign and her supporters. Vicious doesn't even begin to describe it, to be perfectly candid. But when we take a look at all of the things that were done to make this campaign run, I have to share a deep and profound and sincere gratitude for every single one of you who did everything from simply vote for me. And I appreciate those election day messages I got from many of you who decided at the last minute, maybe changed your mind about who you're going to vote for. I sincerely appreciated hearing from you on Election Day. And the messages that I've received since the results were announced have been truly consoling. as we take a look at what happened. And we don't know the entire picture of what happened yet. And I mean that from a statistical point of view, because there are numbers that need to be crunched, and we won't have those numbers available to us in full, probably for about another week or so. One of the key things that I'm going to look for to understand what happened in this election was the turnout. How many Democrats, how many independents, how many Republicans turned out. I will say there has been some chatter on the lines about whether or not Democrats who had a preference as to who Joyce Craig's opponent would be in this election for mayor voted for my opponent, Victoria, over me, feeling that she might be the easier mark. There's been an awful lot of chatter about that, which I honestly, I hadn't thought of. But just today, everything from getting my haircut, and is it not a superb haircut, to any number of conversations that I've had with people just randomly calling saying, I suppose it's possible, but I don't know that it happened. And one way that we will be able to know whether or not it happened is by taking a look at the turnout numbers and trying to figure out from there whether or not Joyce overperformed or underperformed the percentage of Democrats, the number of Democrats who turned out. So while it's all kind of fun speculation at this point in time, it's really nothing more than that. So I do want to tackle, and by the way, if you'd like to call in tonight, you want to share you have questions for me, you want to share your thoughts on the election, your choices before us. The number is 640-3091. That's 640-3091. So in taking a look at the numbers, and yes, I'm going to make, I don't want to say I'm going to make some announcements, but I'm going to let you know some of the things that I'm thinking about on everything from whether or not I'm going to file a recount to what I will do to support someone, if anyone, in the mayor's race this coming election. I think it's probably premature for me to make any statements on that until the recount is done, assuming I file one. But if I don't file one, I will be releasing some sort of statement. If I do file one, I will be waiting to release some sort of statement. But I will walk you through my thought process. I will let you know what I'm thinking and feeling. I will let you know what I am considering, because ultimately, as I am wont to do, I look forward to hearing your feedback and getting your perspective, whether it's here on the television show, through Facebook, email, text, chat, conversation, whatever it is. So let's start with the idea that we had lousy turnout. It did seem light at the polls all day, but believe it or not, 10,584 people turned up to vote. And people are, that's only 18% of our total. I had one guy at Ward 8 who is no fan of mine, didn't think I knew who he was when he was yelling at me from his truck. And he said his name. I said, I know who you are, but I'm talking to you anyway. He's one of those particularly brutal people that would fit right in with a certain campaign's tactics. He's like, and people who complain on Facebook had better stop. They're not voting. They should shut up. Da, 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 da. And I looked at him. I said, well, it all depends on who turns out. So let's tackle the turnout numbers in 2019. And I don't get too wrapped up in the idea of what percentage was it of the overall voter registered voters. That means nothing, because those voter lists change from year to year. And the city just went through a big purge and removed 9,000 people who no longer voted or belonged on our voter list back in July. Including the 3 Democrat campaign workers, including one that was a Joyce Craig staffer in 2019 who voted from Walnut Street. Remember, we shared that with you? Yes, I haven't had a chance to publish the Attorney General's letter. The Attorney General took the interesting position of saying, well, yeah, they did provide proper information regarding domicile. So they registered and voted okay, but they violated the law because they didn't take any of the steps required to actually establish residency, such as registering your car. Remember, all their cars were registered in Massachusetts and New York. Remember that? They are still listed as registered voters where they are legally domiciled, et cetera, et cetera. We've got all of the documents. I'll put a story out there. Yes. And not for nothing. but the Attorney General then turned around and said, and until they do these things to establish domicile in the state of New Hampshire, they may not vote in the future. Isn't that interesting? And oh, by the way, I do want to mention the passing of Bishop John McCormick, the 9th Bishop of Manchester. He died apparently on Election Day. Hopefully he cast his absentee ballot before he passed. But it's, there are a lot of people who've got a lot of mixed feelings and a lot of mixed thoughts about Bishop John McCormick, particularly given his involvement as an auxiliary bishop in Boston and here on the hot seat in New Hampshire when the whole priest scandals were going down. I did get to know Bishop McCormick over the years. I was among the first to actually call for his resignation, and he being a Boston College alumni and my being on the Boston College alumni board of directors for New Hampshire at the time, I was among the first to welcome him, and I was among the first to call for his resignation. But over the years, I get to know Bishop McCormick, and I do believe there is redemption. I don't know exactly what role he may or may not have played in these horrific offenses against children. But at the end of the day, I do believe Bishop McCormick probably did the best that he knew how to do at the time things were being done. And I do think he atoned for whatever wrong he could in any way he could. And I do hope that he finds rest with our Lord now that he has gone on into eternal life. So I would encourage you to keep Bishop McCormick in your prayers as well as his family, because, at the end of the day, Christ came to redeem the world, not to condemn it. And while people of faith often fall short of the standards they try to live by, the only reason why we can get from one day to the next is if we understand that our Lord is merciful as long as we are repentant and as long as we pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and try to do better next time. And I do believe that Bishop McCormick did do that. So back to the election. So in 2019, 8,832 people went to the polls. 8,832 people. In 2021, this awful turnout, and I heard a Republican pundit who's based in Concord on a local radio show talking about how, the low turnout, and this radio talk show host too, Chris Ryan, clearly doesn't know Manchester. Oh, yes, well, this is not an indication that, this is an indication that everybody in Manchester is happy with the situation. Not really, because if you do a little math, which I was taught in public school before it became Common Core, 10,584, which was the 2021 primary turnout, minus 8,832 is an increase of 1,752 voters, or 20%. So there was a 20% increase. Now, what drove that? Is it discontent with the city? Was it a competitive primary between myself and Victoria Sullivan? We really don't know what drove it, but it is objectively true that 20% more people turned out in this election than 2 years ago. Now, what's interesting is that 2 years ago, Joyce Craig got 4,996 votes. This year, she got 5,481. So she picked up 485 votes, a 9.7% increase in her vote count. Okay, so one of the things we'll be looking for when the breakdown of Republicans, Democrats, and Independents comes out from the city clerk's office is what was the increase in Democrat turnout this year over 2 years ago. If the increase in Democrat turnout was 20% and Joyce Craig's vote count went up 10%, did that mean that a serious number of Democrats were unhappy with Joyce and voted for somebody else? Does it mean that the shenanigans that people thought may be afoot, or think may have been afoot in the election, where they went to vote for the Republican they most wanted to see survive the primary? We'll never be able to answer those questions, but at least we'll have some foundation. Now, if the Democratic turnout only went up 5% and Joyce Craig's vote count went up 10%, well, that might indicate that people are happy with Joyce. So we're going to crunch those numbers. 2 years ago, Victoria Sullivan got 3,418 votes. This year, she got 2,546. She actually saw a decrease in her vote count of 872 votes, or a decrease of 25.5%. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that Victoria lost favor with the voters, because after all, yours truly was in the race. But I'm looking at it, but I didn't do those numbers. Our combined numbers would have been an interesting set of numbers. So we'll call it roughly 5,000. So there was roughly a 40% increase in the combined vote between myself and Victoria over Victoria's numbers, maybe closer to a 50% increase. You see, that would be 17. Yeah. About 45% increase in the opposition vote count over Joyce Craig. Of course, in order to make that a real number, we'd have to add Glenn R.J. Ouellette's 317 votes, which will knock it down a couple percentage points. So we'll call it 45%. So it's clear that while Joyce's vote count did go up, and that probably my educated guess, what is it Rush Limbaugh used to say? Wisdom combined with experience, or I forget what he used to say. But just my familiarity with how these things work in the city, my guess is her turnout, her increase was probably driven by an increase in the Democratic turnout. And, the combined vote that Victoria and I got over what she got 2 years ago was definitely driven by more Republicans coming to the polls. So, and these are key numbers to keep an eye on, because it will, I think, show some energy, right? If both parties have seen an increase in their turnout, then it's going to be a pretty interesting thing to see. Now, as far as the results went, I was surprised by a couple of the wards where I thought I would do better than I did, but I carried Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 10, and Ward 12. I narrowly lost Wards 3, 4, 5, and 7, and I didn't do so well in 6 and 8, which actually surprised me, Ward 8. And then Ward 9, Victoria's home ward, she did pretty well there. So it's curious to me to see how the numbers break out, and I really wish I had the R's, D's, and I's here. But, to know how the turnout changed from one election to the next. Now, clearly both had more people voting, meaning Republicans and Democrats. Maybe there were more independents voting too. But, if Republicans and independents were up double by what the Democrats were up, it could show more energy on one side than the other. So we're going to keep an eye on that. And hopefully by next Thursday's show, I'll be able to complete the analysis, because I'll have the data and we'll be able to drill down on it. In 2019, and here are the benchmarks that we're looking at, okay? So in 2019, 40, and this is important to note, because again, this is all going to be part of the analysis. In 2019, 42% of the turnout was Democrat. We're talking about in the primary, 42.4, 30.3% of the turnout was Republican, and 27.2% of the turnout was undecided. So in other words, the way I do this analysis is you have to make some assumptions, because you just don't know. And your primary voters are typically what we in the business call your crawl over glass voters. They're your dedicateds, they're your diehards. So when you look at that and you see, okay, well, 42.4% of the turnout was Democrat, I say Joyce Craig got all 42.4% of those votes. Of those voters. She got 100% of the Democrat turnout. Victoria got 100% of the Republican turnout. And the undecideds, well, this is how you figure out where they went. Because if you assume that each candidate got their party's base vote in total, then you can figure out more or less where the independents went. And this is where I think this election is going to hinge. Because looking back on it, this is pretty much Republicans win if they carry the independent vote sufficiently, because Democrat turnout in the city is always substantially higher than the Republican turnout. So 2 years ago in the primary, if you crunch the numbers, which of course I did, they're in little itty bitty pieces everywhere, Joyce Craig got 63% of the independents. She picked up 1,254 of the 2,400 independents who voted, of the 1,996 independents who voted. And Victoria only picked up 742 of the independents, or 37%. It's going to be a little more difficult to determine the trend of what the independents did, because you had two Republicans splitting the non-Democratic vote, Republican and independent. So I'm not sure that we're going to be able to get much of a trend line on that, except we should be able to determine how many independents voted for either Victoria or myself once we subtract the number of independents that voted for Joyce from the independent turnout total, right? So we're going to figure out whatever number of Democrats turned out. We're going to subtract that from Joyce's vote, and the difference will be the number of independents that voted for Joyce. So we'll see whether or not the independents really pulled themselves over to either myself or Victoria and show that perhaps they are unhappy with the current administration. So we'll be looking to do that. Now, I do think the Republican Party's statement about, and even Victoria's statement about, this election is clear evidence that, excuse me, Joyce Craig is in trouble. No, it's not, to be perfectly candid with you. She got just under 53% of the vote in this primary. When I ran 20 years ago, Bob Baines just barely broke over 50%. I think he got like 50.5%. And the combined total between myself and Joe Levasseur was the other 49.5. And I was still, at that point, 19 points behind Bob Baines. And perceptually, that was not a good place to be, even though we did our best to make the case that the combined vote total was what it was. And not for nothing, that year, the Democrat turnout was roughly almost exactly what Bob Baines got, if I remember correctly. So 2 years ago, Joyce Craig got 56.5% of the vote in the primary to Victoria's, I think it was 37. So relative to the overall percentage, she lost about 2.5 points, but that doesn't necessarily mean she's in trouble. Okay. So she still broke 50%. And, it wasn't by a little bit. It was just by just a shade under 3 percentage points. So she's still in the catbird seat. And I don't see any damage. I don't see any evidence that she's in real trouble. If she had come in under 50%, if she had come in, closer to mid 40s, that would be an indication that perhaps, she had some issues. Now, Victoria got 24% of the vote, and Joyce got 53. Do a little math. That's 29 points. So Victoria is 10 points further behind than I was 20 years ago, the last time there were two Republican challengers facing a Democratic incumbent. So, that's the first step to getting somewhere is admitting where you are in the process. And so a 29 point difference is a steep climb. And just editorially, as I was trying to build support for my campaign, I kept telling people why it was important for them to get involved in the primary early as a way of building momentum for a campaign. Because, and I said this over and over again, the closer Victoria and I are to each other, the further away we will both be from Joyce, right? 20 years ago, Bob Baines we'll call it 51%. I got 32%. What's that? 51 and 32 is 83. Joe Levasseur got 17%. There was a pretty healthy difference between myself and Joe Levasseur. If it had been a Republican primary, I would have won by more than 60-40. And I would have come out of the primary, with a head of steam rather than the perceptual problem that I'm 19 points behind and probably dead on election day. Victoria has to deal with that, and how she deals with it will determine, I think, whether or not people are going to invest themselves in her candidacy, and that includes me. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So the reality of the numbers is what it is. And when you start from a 29-point hole, and some people are saying, oh, well, we add your vote to her vote, and we're only in a 6-point hole. That may be, but that wasn't the case when I ran 20 years ago. The final numbers turned out Bob got, what is it? It was the same margin that Victoria lost by 2 years ago. It was 57-43, 56-42, right in that range. So it was a 14-point difference, despite the fact that if you added our primary numbers to our general numbers, our primary numbers, it was razor thin. I'd like to tell you that it works that way, but the general election turnout is a different turnout than the primary election turnout. And while Republicans tend to do better in the general election, 29 points is a big hole, is a big hill to climb. So again, once we get the breakdown of who turned out to vote, at least I'll have a better understanding, I think, of what happened here in this election. So again, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts on the race, 640-3091. That's 640-3091. Okay. So now on to the race. I do think that I do think a couple things. One, for as many people as we got to, and I did neighborhood events or knocked on doors, I think I got to 10 of the 12 wards personally. And my campaign got to every ward. At the end of the day, our glossy brochure, as my dearly departed friend Danny Wibby used to say, the glossy brochure, we got that into roughly 13 to 14,000 hands. And I'd like to think that if we had another week on the campaign, we would have gotten it into some neighborhoods that we just didn't have time to get to, that I think would have made a difference. I think also one of the things that made a difference, and this is more of an appeal to the local news media than it is a criticism. So many doors I knocked on, people were unaware that there was an election. Even some subscribers to, the local newspaper, the Union Leader. And I really think, I really started to get a lot of feedback from people the Sunday the 12th, when the article came out in the Union Leader, the New Hampshire Sunday News, in their own words, where the Union Leader gave us 5 questions and gave us 150 words to give us our answers. When I was out door knocking that Sunday, I heard from any number of people that they had read the article, and that article won me their vote. And I do think that the news media's silence, whether it's the Union Leader, the local radio stations, certainly WMUR, I do think their silence or their inattention to the campaign over the many weeks that it raged on social media and in other places was a factor in people being not as engaged as we would like them to see. And I hope that changes going forward, because at the end of the day, the issues facing the city are serious, and they deserve the attention of the media. And not for nothing, it wasn't for lack of trying on my part. If you go to the news page at girardformayor.com, which is still up and will remain up for the foreseeable future, you'll see all of the press releases that I put out and all of the issues that I put them out on. And the fact that virtually none of them ended up in the Union Leader, to me is disappointing, not just as a candidate or for selfish reasons, but how do you expect the general population, especially your readership, to know what's going on in an election if you're not actually covering the election? To its credit, the Manchester Inklink did some stuff, but mostly they were focused on endorsements. And when something did hit the Union Leader, it was usually an endorsement. And for whatever reason, certain endorsements were seen as more meritorious than others, so they get printed where others didn't. Who knows who makes those decisions? But the Manchester Inklink at least made an effort to put things out. They even turned one of my proposals, or one of my press releases, the one on how to deal with revals in the future and what to do to try to mitigate the damage done to at least our seniors on fixed income and our disabled folks with exemptions. They actually turned that into a story, but that's the only one I can think of that got turned into a story, not just from me, but from any campaign. Other than that, it was this horse race thing of endorsements. And I want to thank the 44 people or organizations, including the union leader, for their endorsements of me. And I'm particularly proud that almost everybody who endorsed me was a locally elected official or someone who had represented Manchester, like Senator Bob Smith, at a federal level or a state level, or had tried to represent Manchester either as a state senator, a governor, or someone else. So almost every endorsement that I had was a local endorsement of people that had either represented Manchester citizens or tried to represent Manchester citizens, and an enormous number of them were school board members and aldermen. So, the people you work with at the city level. So I want to give a shout out to them and a big thanks. And, big thanks to the union leader for its support. That certainly didn't hurt my cause toward the end, although a certain campaign's approach to attacking the paper on social media makes me wonder whether or not, if she gets the endorsement in the general election campaign, whether or not they'll dismiss it as a useless endorsement from a terrible paper, the way they tried to devalue it for me on social media. Anyway, Ricky, you're on the air. Thanks for calling in.
Rich, super appreciate your show.
Thank you.
And I think it's quite an embarrassment to the city of Manchester that only 10,000 people came out to vote for the mayor race. I think it's shame on the voters. They have nothing now to say when something happens with Joyce Craig or what have you with the city. When 10,000 people come out, which is a drop in the bucket for the people that are here.
I agree, but you know what, Ricky? It actually turned out to be one of the better turnouts we've seen in recent years, and not that it's high, but horrible. It's one of the better ones. Yeah, I agree with you.
Absolutely horrible. And as far as the onion leader goes, don't shed any tears over the onion leader. They're not going to change their stripes. As far how I'm not really in a super negative mood, but now that I'm not talking to you. And you're talking about the onion leader. They're just terrible. And I think someone like yourself who puts on super energy out there and wants to make some change, I super respect that. But yet again, shame on the voters here for not getting out. Yeah. And they have nothing to complain about if you didn't go out and vote.
Oh, that
I think it would have been a great mayor, and I'll let you go on that.
Well, thank you, Rich. I appreciate that, Ricky. And if you want to chime in, 640-3091. And that's really why I'm appealing to local media. I called WGIR or sent them Facebook messages, emails on more than one occasion, trying to get an interview, during the campaign. Ultimately, Jeff Chittister, who fills in from time to time, I contacted him and he had me on when he was guest hosting. But if the local media is not focused on the fact that there is a primary election, then you can almost bank on the fact that there is going to be a lower turnout than you would like to see. And we have Tim on the line. Tim, thanks for calling in. Tim, you're on the line. Thanks for calling in. Tim,
I'm on the line. Somebody else was speaking to.
Yeah, you're listed. Tim, turn off your TV in the background or turn down the volume because I've got you on the air here.
Okay.
So don't listen to your TV. Don't listen to your TV. Listen to me. You're on the air.
Oh, yeah, Rich.
Yes.
I'm somebody that voted for you.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry that you aren't, a candidate against Joyce Craig. But I wish you would show more support for Victoria Sullivan because, the purpose here is the city needs to have a new mayor.
Well, it does, and I'm going to talk about that later in the show, and I thank you for calling.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, but yeah, all about turnout. And, well, I guess we'll turn our attention since Tim has opened it up. And by the way, if anyone wants to call, 640-3091. I guess we'll open it up to that. So, first of all, I have not made any statement about Victoria. I will say that Victoria has not sought to contact me. I have heard nothing from her or her campaign, except some of her people calling some of my supporters to try to get them to get me to support her. And these are people who know me, so they can pick up the phone and they can call me directly. But I'm not gonna lie to you folks. And I told you at the beginning of the show, I was going to share my thoughts and let you know what I'm thinking, what I'm going to work through. And I'm not going to say anything about necessarily what I'm going to do until after I decide, A, there's, whether or not I'm going to ask for a recount, and B, if I do, once the recount is over. So, I guess we'll stop there and we'll take a phone call from Patrice. Patrice, thanks for calling in.
Hi, Rich. It's Patrice.
Hi, Patrice. And thank you so much for all that you did to help the campaign. I am so grateful to you for what you did.
No, I think all the signs on this side of the river are done. I think.
So that means we've
got home 20 minutes ago.
Well, you know what? If I call for a recount and we win, you're going to have to go out there and put them all back up.
That's not funny.
No, don't worry. We'll get you help, though.
Okay, well, get me help. No, I'm calling in tonight because I wanted to thank you for putting your name on the ballot. Oftentimes, those of us with certain traditional values don't have anyone to vote for.
Mm-hmm.
Gave us a voice. You gave us a voice for those of us who support the family, who support the unborn, who really want to see Manchester. We know that Manchester, we can't go back, but can't we bring her into her future glory with the traditional values that made this city great? So you were the candidate on the ballot that allowed us to have a vote with a clean conscience. I can sleep at night. I voted for you. I'm now 54 years old, and I'm not willing to hold my nose and vote for somebody because they're the lesser of the two evils.
Mm-hmm.
So I need some time to think, and maybe you'll talk about that with us over the next few weeks. But thank you for letting us have a place to put our mark, and thank you for being on the ballot.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for all that you did to help. I am appreciative. All right. So yeah, let's talk about it. So here's what I'm wrestling with, and I'm going to start sort of where things ended. Victoria made a statement to the Manchester Inklink, or it was reported in the Manchester Inklink, that she and I had a meeting with Corky Messner, the former U.S. Senate candidate and chairman of, I think, the New Hampshire Advantage PAC, where he tried to get one of the two of us to drop out of the race. Or in the alternate, pledge to support each other. And on election night, she was asked about whether or not, I would support her. She said, well, we had a meeting and we pledged that we would support the other if they won. So I have to start here because that was just flat out, that was a lie. And it really bothered me that she would say that because while I'm not going to lie to you folks, I never do. While I did say I would support her in the general election if I lost, she emphatically said she would not support me. And her reason for that were, the trouble I got myself into, 7 years ago when I sent messages that I shouldn't have sent to a 30-year-old woman who was not my wife. And I know many of you know that story and many of you don't, but the long and the short of it is that's something my wife and I worked out a long time ago. That's something that voters in this city, especially on social media, were presented with when I ran for school board, just about a year after that took place, when I defeated, when I was the only candidate on the ballot to defeat an incumbent when I ran for school board at large. And of course, that fur flew when I ran for re-election unopposed, but it flew nonetheless. And Victoria Sullivan's campaign, including Victoria herself, were pretty viciously using that. People who would endorse me would get phone calls either from her or members of her inner circle who would trot that out and use it as a reason why they should change their mind. Any number of private conversations were had, and towards the end, that stuff from Victoria and her inner circle was all over social media. And while it was upsetting to me, it actually really angered my wife. And my wife has sworn in the 26 years that I've been with her, literally twice. Once was more than 7 years ago when I did something stupid, which, I certainly regret and have more than mended my ways from. But reading what certain people posted on social media on my own Facebook page in response to articles that I put up, republishing editorials, republishing, the article I mentioned where, the second time I've heard my wife swear in 26 years was reading that stuff. And so they made the mistake of angering Mrs. Girard, which is quite a feat. And so I need to be mindful of how my wife feels about things and how they not only portrayed that incident, but misportrayed it and used it to make any number of other false allegations that they know damn well are false. So there's that. And, I was more or less okay with that until, but that mistake from 7 years ago had Victoria Sullivan in that meeting saying that she couldn't look her two sons in the eyes, knowing that she supported a moral reprobate like me. Okay. So she goes out there and publicly lies about our pledging to support the other when she simply did not do that. And that really, I try not to let things get under my skin, but that was that to me was her trying to back me into a corner and make it look like I'd be breaking my word if I didn't now come forward and do what she herself was unwilling to do. And as I admitted, it was something that I said I would do. But there were discussions in that meeting about the use of that personal matter in how she was conducting herself, which of course, she admitted in one instance, but denied all the others and said that the other people doing it, they didn't speak for the campaign, but they're very clearly in her inner circle. And let me tell you something, as a candidate, as a guy who's run for office, when you have people in your inner circle who are saying and doing things that you don't agree with or don't believe are correct, you do one of two things. You collar them and correct it, or you remove them from the campaign if it doesn't represent what you want. I even had people posting up that I shouldn't be allowed to run for mayor because somehow I wasn't a registered homeowner, and a whole lot of other things. So that was very unsettling, not only to me, but to Mrs. Girard, who apparently is on the telephone. So I'm going to be quiet and let my wife speak. Hi, lover.
Hey, honey, I just wanted to call and make sure you do not forget to tell the voters how welcoming Victoria Sullivan was of your help 2 years ago. So I guess you weren't a reprobate then.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure you remember to tell the voters that all of a sudden, because you ran against her, you're now a reprobate. And that's all it is. So I just wanted to remind you of that in case you forgot.
Well, thank you, dear. And of course, all of the times that she was either a guest or a guest host of the radio show in the many years following that situation. But, it's politics, but there it is. All right, love. Thanks.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Yep. Bye.
See, quoting Jerry Maguire, we complete each other. And I'm a very fortunate man that my wife gave me the opportunity to make good or make amends for what I did, and I'm happy to say that through her good graces and the grace of God, our marriage has never been stronger and our family has never been better. And we're fortunate too that we're part of a faith that understands redemption and forgiveness, and that we're all flawed human beings who have an opportunity to make good. And it's not always the mistake you make, it's how you address it once it's done. So there is that, and I'm not gonna lie to you. It's hard, for as much as I try not to let things get personal when I deal with my politics, and we've talked about this on the show any number of occasions. It's hard to not let that one go, because really the only real lever they had on, trying to break support away from me was that. It wasn't that she had more or better experience than I did, because clearly a 2-term state rep is not going to have the breadth and depth of knowledge that somebody like myself, who's been a school board member, an alderman, a mayor's aide, a charter commissioner, a media figure covering these issues and stories for years. She can't compete there. It clearly wasn't on the issues. She didn't hit me once on the issues. She didn't attack me once on the issues. She didn't differentiate herself once for me on the issues. So it wasn't that. So they went after, they went for the personal smears and the character assassination. And to some degree, it was very useful for them, especially in getting various state political figures from the Republican establishment to sign on to her campaign. So there's that. And then, I'm not going to get into great depth about this tonight, but there are some very serious issue differences between Victoria Sullivan and I that need to be overcome if I'm to support her campaign. She took $1,000 from Into Action Sober Living. That is the operator of several illegal sober homes across the city. She went on to a TV show that I think it was the same show where she and Tammy had some fun at the expense of French Canadian Catholics, where she talked about how she broke bread with those people and, what a bunch of ogres the neighbors were. And she said this in multiple Facebook posts and newspaper articles that the neighbors, they're NIMBYs, not in my backyard. They don't care about these people. They don't care about recovery. They don't understand the issue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for her to take $1,000 from Into Action Sober Living, which operates multiple of these sober living facilities illegally in the city. And when I mean illegally, I mean they don't conform to the zoning code, they don't conform to the housing code, they don't conform to the building code, they don't conform to the life safety code, they don't conform and they don't want to conform. When I see her on TV shows say, we need to pass this, change the definition of family to make it easier for them to operate. When she takes money for them, knowing that they are suing the city to overturn the decision of the Zoning Board of Adjustment on one of those sober homes, which happens to be in my neighborhood, the epicenter of NIMBYism, even though we welcomed with open arms the legally zoned, legally operating Liberty House, which is just a block and a half from my house, literally. I have a problem with that. Even if I didn't have a problem with her position, I'd have a problem with her taking money from an organization that's suing the city. That's a problem to me. And I fundamentally believe that these operations are a threat to our neighborhoods. And I can say that with some authority because in addition to my own neighborhood, I've been invited to other neighborhoods where they've been a problem. And it's not pretty what they do to the areas that they operate in. And it's not that they're sober housing. It's that they are, look, if they're knowingly violating the city's rules, what kind of operation do you think they're going to run? All right, caller, we think your name is Paul, but we're not sure. Thanks for calling in.
Hello?
Yes. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, Paul, you can't listen to the TV and be on the air, so pick one.
All right, hold on. All right, so I got a question.
Go ahead.
How's your day?
Unbelievable. How's yours?
Mine's pretty good. So apparently you have a bald spot.
Oh boy. Yes, I have a bald spot. That's a guy who's just trying to soak up time. Don't let Paul come back on the air, please. So, and so, yeah, Brendan's saying he has a bald spot too. Although it's kind of unfair because you shave your head. I have a problem with that because of what she's already said she'll do as mayor. So we need our laws enforced here in the city, especially when it comes to preserving the quality of life in our neighborhoods. And you can't have it both ways and say you both want to protect the quality of life in neighborhoods, but let these lawless operations go unaddressed. And it's a problem. And it's not a problem just for the neighborhoods in which they locate. It's a problem for the city because they have such a high flop out rate in these things that they contribute to the homeless problem, they contribute to the crime problem. And I've regaled you with the stories of what's happened in my neighborhood since these places have opened up, and that's fine. And speaking of money, by the way, in 2017, in the primary filing, 10 days before the primary, Victoria raised $67,330. This time out, she raised $50,356. So, meanwhile, Mayor Craig has raised she's raised about $440,000. Now, not that money determines everything. But, there are a lot of things that I could say here, and I'm not going to get into any of the names right now, but gee, if I'm such a, morally unsupportable reprobate who doesn't deserve to be on the ballot, I can go through her filing list and I can find people who have been arrested for, soliciting prostitutes. I can find people who've been arrested for, felony phone jamming. I can find people in her list of supporters who don't stand for any of the things that she claims to stand for. And I'd say there are probably more of them than others. And I could make issues of all of these things, about things she's done in her past or things that people who are supporting her have done in their past, et cetera, et cetera. I chose not to go down that road. Yeah, I could take a look at, Allison Pittman Giles sending her money. Now, if you're concerned about CMC being taken over by, Dartmouth Hitchcock Health, which is currently a present issue again, you might be concerned about, a former CEO that tried to lead that charge how many ever years ago. So, I could get into any number of these things, and I could bring this down to the level that Victoria and her campaign have operated under, not just in the last week or two of the campaign, but over the course of the whole thing. But I didn't do that. Whenever I addressed Victoria on the rare occasions that I did, I addressed her on the policy issues, particularly when it came to the sober homes or the idea that we should somehow turn the Sununu Center into transitional housing for recovering addicts and homeless people, in areas where there were fundamental disagreements on the issues. But primarily when people asked me what the difference between myself and Victoria was, as I heard often on their doorstep, I talked about my experience at City Hall versus her lack of experience at City Hall. And, because really, to be perfectly honest with you, that was the primary selling point of my campaign. I really think that Manchester needs somebody at City Hall who understands how it works, so they understand not only how and where it can change, but why, it can change. And I just don't see that. So these are things that I'm not saying I'm not going to support Victoria, but I'm telling you, for all of those of you, and there are some of you, not many, but many of you, my supporters, have asked what I'm going to do. And I'm sharing with you in as honest, straightforward, sincere way as I can where I am in this process and what I am struggling with. Ultimately, I need to come to the conclusion of what is in the best interest of the city. And at this point in time, I seriously don't know what that is. And my contemplation at this point, as I try to take this all into account and come to a conclusion about what I'm going to do and why I'm going to do it, because frankly, whatever I do, I am not going to say, oh, just kidding about anything that I've said. As you know, I say the things I mean, and I mean the things I say, and I stand by them. So this is what I'm looking at. And I'm happy to take your feedback. I'm happy to take your, take your guidance. I'm happy to take your comments, even your criticisms of it, and share it with me, because that will all factor into, ultimately what I do. At this point in time, what I'm really looking at doing is being a referee. Joyce Craig is going to say and do things. Victoria Sullivan's going to say and do things. And I know both of them and the issues well enough to either say, yep, that's right, or nope, that's not, or I'm calling BS on that, or actually, that's not a half bad idea. So, and I think over my political career, over my career in radio and everywhere else, even with people I don't agree with or don't like, right? I've given them credit where credit's due. Find me anything that I've said about Victoria Sullivan's time as a state rep that's been negative, either when she was a co-host or a guest host or a segment anchor or whatnot, a guest on my radio show, or what have I said about her legislative record here? I've not attacked her personally or her record or anything she's done in politics once. I said fair game to go after issue differences, which I've done, but nothing. And I realize we have disagreements over whether or not it was, quote, an unfair or personal attack on the French Canadian Catholic thing, but I leave that up to you to decide, because not only did I post the video, I posted a transcript of everything that was said, unedited, uncut, in full context. And you may agree with my take on it. You may not agree with my take on it, but at least I put all of the information out there for everybody to make a decision. Okay. Unlike some, I love it. Joyce Craig, right? I posted the article from the September 12th New Hampshire Sunday News in full. My answers, her answers, Victoria's answers. You go to Joyce Craig's website, all she posted was her answers. I don't know if that's a copyright violation, because I don't think there was a link back to the Union Leader site. I could be wrong about that. But I believe in giving you the whole picture. And it really irritates me when people give you selected pieces of the picture that make their case, while leaving everything that might be counter to it out. I think that's deceptive. I think it's dishonest, and I think it's unfair to the voters. And if nothing else, I believe in full disclosure, and I've done everything I humanly possibly can to make sure that if I say something or do something, you understand it from soup to nuts, beginning to end, in full context, because that's the way I believe people make better decisions. I'm proud of the campaign that we ran because we put substance out there. I was often criticized for the style. I could be better on social media, or I'm not doing this right, or I'm not doing that right. One thing I think we did do right was we got the substance out there and right. And not everybody agreed with what I put out there, but nobody could argue that I didn't make my case, that I didn't lay out what I saw was the problem, and that I didn't lay out a solution that was responsive to the problem that I saw. And there it is. So, and as you can tell, probably by how I'm fidgeting and whatnot, these are somewhat sort of stressful considerations for me. I take them seriously, but I think what I'm going to do over the course of the campaign, any aldermanic candidate, school board candidate, hell, I'll even let Jim O'Connell come on this show to discuss what they see as the issues and what they're going to do about them. Nobody's going to get a free pass from me. I will challenge people where I think they need to be challenged, and I will, let them, but always, as I did on the radio show, make sure they get an opportunity to make their pitch to you in this audience so that you can decide for yourself. So I will do my best to feature whoever wants to come on this show, Republican, Democrat, or anything else. And I guess I'll referee the mayor's race, at least for the upcoming weeks that I see, and discuss, well, it might not be, it won't be Howard Cosell on Monday Night Football, but it could be interesting and fun to watch. And to those of you who've said you're going to write me in on the ballot, I thank you for that. Who knows? Maybe things will get to a point where I just say, where I don't do anything to discourage that. I don't know. But there's a lot going on. And yes, there is a lot at stake. And, the question is going to be, this is not all just about the mayor's race. There are a number of aldermanic races. Speaking of which, congratulations to Eddie Sapienza in Ward 8. He's now the alderman from Ward 8 and will be till the end of the year. And if he wins in November, he'll be there for the next term. Anyway, I'm getting the wrap-up signal. I hope you understand where I'm at, where I'm coming from. An email will go out to those on my list and up on Facebook tomorrow about whether or not I recount. Until then, be good, be well. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. I'm proud to have in the audience. I'm grateful for the support that you've offered me in this campaign. Until next week, be good, be well. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Good night.